Welcome back to the Mental Performance Masterclass. My name is Nick Kleitsch, and with me, as always, is the owner of Lit Leadership and Performance, Scott Litterer. Scott, how are we doing this evening?
Fantastic, Nick. Exciting topic tonight. Again, looking forward to it.
Aren't they all exciting to talk about?
They are. I have to admit, I look forward to creating these episodes every week because I just think it's something that we can all relate to. We can all use it, whether we're an athlete or whether we're a parent, a spouse, or just working in our daily job.
I couldn't agree more. And I just feel like we at times talk about maybe similar things, but there's always these little side roads we can go down. That was what we were kind of joking about before we got into today's episode. So just as a quick recap for folks listening into maybe the first time for us here or following along, we are on season 2, which is motivation. And we are on episode 3, which is going to be titled, drumroll please, the alter ego effect. And if you are hearing that for the first time and don't know what it is, I am so grateful because we are going to indulge you in all your curiosities. So first, though, just as a very clean way to introduce our episode, Scott, we've been talking about motivational buttons. We've been talking about what motivation is. And I thought you had a really nice way to kind of work into this episode. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, I think one thing that I think people maybe don't think about enough is the fact that as human beings, we are always moving toward pleasure or we're moving away from pain. If you think about just about any area of our lives, when we're motivated, if, for example, maybe we're motivated to lose a few pounds because our class reunion is coming up, right? And so we're motivated because we want to look good. It feels good to look in the mirror when we lose a few pounds. We look a little bit better. And we're maybe a little bit afraid of showing up at the class reunion and one of our old friends going, boy, you put on some weight, right? That's the pain that you might be worried about. But then when the class reunion's over, what happens? Then the pleasure of eating those great foods and eating ice cream every night kicks back in. So I feel like we're always being motivated somehow through the moving towards pleasure away from pain.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to begin there because I think it's important to understand as we learn how to motivate ourselves, we can understand a little bit more internal wiring of our subconscious and our brain. And I say that and you might be thinking, oh, Nick, that's a little bit kind of out there, but it's a survival mechanism. Our brain is helping us trying to survive. And so this is why seeking pleasure feels so good. And yet on the opposite end of the spectrum, when we don't avoid pain and work through pain, that can bring us the ultimate kind of satisfaction that comes along with the cost of going through what it is that we are going through. However, the survival mechanism is not the topic of conversation here today. We are going to stay on the alter ego effect. So if you wouldn't mind, Scott, I'd like to just detail kind of the core idea of what the alter ego effect is.
And the idea of the alter ego effect is that you actually, in your mind, become somebody else or something else when you're performing. So a good example would be Dwayne Johnson's The Rock, right? When he's performing, he is The Rock. And it's I don't know how far you want me to go into this right now, but it basically, you're becoming somebody else. I mean, think about, for me, for example, I don't like to get up in front of people and dance. But if you gave me some type of costume I could put on, maybe a mascot costume for some college mascot, I'd dance away all day, right? Because nobody would know who I was. And so it's this idea that if I could become somebody else, whether it's actually put a costume on or just in my mind, believe that I was somebody or something else, it changes your whole relationship. It changes your confidence. It changes how you perform. And that's what we're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. That's a great way to introduce it. And I will also follow that up with maybe a little bit more technical definition. So the alter ego effect is the practice of intentionally creating and stepping into a version of yourself, an alter ego, that embodies qualities, traits, and mindsets you need to succeed in any given situation. So you gave a very nice introduction in terms of ideas and concepts. And really what we're doing is we are mentally reframing an alter ego, a version of ourselves that may not already exist, or we're trying to, push our limits in any given situation. So any comments on that before we get into more of maybe why this works or why someone would want to maybe take a look at it?
I think we'll get to some more examples later. Let's dig into the why, and then we'll get to some examples after that.
Fantastic. So just as a quick combination, so we're motivated towards pleasure to avoid pain. However, this idea of an alter ego can help us go into a painful situation. So why does this work? Well, the first thing that I think is really fascinating and people should really pay attention to is separating yourself from your limiting beliefs. Instead of being weighed down by doubt, fear, and maybe past baggage, this alter ego allows for a free space to create somebody that is who you want to be or how you want to show up. Any comments there, Scott?
Well, I mean, I think my dancing example was a great example, because if I could separate myself, if I could be somebody else, it's not me being embarrassed by being a poor dancer, right? It's my alter ego. So I don't care if my alter ego makes a fool of himself. It's fine. So it's that separating ourselves from our limiting beliefs. And one of my limiting beliefs is that I think I can't dance. So
there we
that
go.
would be an example.
I love that. That's a very good, playful example. I would also say this coincides with, generally speaking, you're going to want to morph into your alter ego when you're going into a situation where there are some preset nerves, or you're really in your own mind about how you're going to, show up for yourself. So that's why I think it's very powerful, is because it's literally saying this is a free excuse for you to practice turning into someone who you may not believe you are. So a great first bullet point as to why this concept works. Number 2, this is probably the more fun of the 3, and that is it activates hidden potential. So with this alter ego, and we're building our alter ego, and we can get into a little bit of that later in the episode. We can be fearless, let's say. We could be disciplined. We could be creative. We could be confident. You can tell that I'm just piecing these words together. But any comments on that, Scott?
Well, I would just mention that this is work that I've done with athletes before. When I worked for a company, Z Winning Mindset, I did this with athletes. I still do this in my own company today, is to help athletes develop an alter ego and to think about, if you were going to be somebody else, what would you like to be? What would you like your alter ego to be like? Would you like to be super fast, quick? Would you be a very good listener? Would you be very strong? Would you be fearless, right? Would you be aggressive? And it's so fun because they can actually become somebody else. It's almost like they're creating somebody on a video game, and that's who they're going to become. And then we also talk to them about, when are you going to switch? Is it going to be when you take that warm-up off before your competition? Is it going to be when you step onto the athletic field, the baseball diamond, or the football field, or the wrestling mat, or the volleyball court? When are you going to flip that switch? And so that's the work I've done in the past, and it's been a lot of fun, because I really think it's a creative way to unleash the power and potential that you have inside of you.
Yeah, so good. Now, just for a moment, if you're an everyday person listening to this and you're like, hey, Nick and Scott, like the alter ego effect, that sounds like a movie star thing. Like, I don't know. What I would encourage you to do is think about maybe your favorite movie star or favorite performer or what have you. And it could be someone local to you, maybe a local individual in the community that always appears confident in some way, shape, or form, or other great attributes. Maybe understand that they could be going through an exercise like this, or that may invite you to actually be creative in a sense of, well, why don't I try this, right? Why don't I try this idea and play around with it a little bit? And I really think whether you're going to create an entire person like Dwayne Johnson and The Rock, or it's just as simple as, hey, when I go into this particular setting, when I'm going into a small scale performance or a meeting, I'm going to quickly mentally rehearse and tell myself, this is who's going to show up. So at the smallest level, the alter ego effect can be extremely powerful, because you're just simply, to your point, Scott, shifting into a different place and trying to show up as someone who you probably should be showing up with or as anyway.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I mean, so many of us leave that potential that's inside of us locked inside of us. And this is just a great way to unleash that potential and really let people see that what your talents and traits are.
100%. So the third bullet point I had, and we had kind of alluded to it here, it's after we understand why it works, right? So again, it separates us from our limiting beliefs, and then also it activates our hidden potential. But then to really drive home this point, it is the ability to switch on and off. So we also have to know when we are going to go into our alter ego or not. So that is just kind of a nice way to button up how and why it works. Now, we were detailing before we hopped on the show on just some real life examples that we felt were applicable here. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Scott, to really kind of conclude this episode on a high note.
Well, I'll just give a couple examples. And again, I was a longtime wrestling coach, so I'll give an example from that sport. This has probably been 14 years ago, something like that. We had a sports psychologist come in and talk to our team, and he talked to our athletes about developing alter egos. And one of our athletes decided he was going to be the fireman. And part of it was because his favorite move is the fireman's carry. But the real benefit from being the fireman is that we know that firemen never run away from a challenge. Firemen run into the fire, not away from the fire. And when you have that type of mentality going into a sporting event, a job interview, public speaking, where you look forward to taking on challenges, you know that you're going to perform better than when you're scared and try to avoid something. So that'd be an example that I saw work in my personal life. And this is more of kind of putting on a different hat, I would call it, is the first time that my wife heard me coach wrestling, I literally scared her. She had never heard me yell. I don't yell at home. I'm pretty quiet. I'm pretty even keel. If I get upset, I get even quieter. And so I'm not a yeller. And she came to the first wrestling meet that she watched me coach. And she heard me screaming and yelling at the top of my lungs in that gym. And she's like, where did my husband go? Scott Litterer was not in the gym. Coach Litt was in the gym. And I was in my coaching alter ego. And I don't know that I really purposely did that. But I can tell you that when I'm in that setting, I am confident because I've had success. I just believe in myself, right. And confidence a lot of times, goes along with the alter ego. The alter ego not only helps you be more aggressive, helps you do things that you otherwise wouldn't do, but it elevates your confidence, times 10, I would say.
Yeah. And that's a wonderful real life example, I think, for both of those cases. So maybe if you're a parent that has an athlete, or a performer, right? A performer of opera or I'm trying to think of the word I'm not thinking of right now. Show choir. There we go. Like a show choir performance or acting performance in school. This could be something that'd be very helpful for them. So I would encourage you to take a look at that. The other thing I wanted to really kind of get into here before we get to our final point is, as you alluded to there, Scott, your alter ego can be used in really two different ways. The first is to avoid or overcome limiting beliefs, as we stated earlier, where you're separating who you think you are to overcome pain. And the reverse of that is when you do something really well and confidently, you can build on that to where you became Coach Lit. You didn't officially do it per se, but maybe it's an area of life where you're already crushing it and you want to amplify that tenfold. And so you create a coach or a director or a doctor or this or that who can really just, again, 10x your ability and your confidence and all these great traits. So I see it as the ability to overcome difficulty or as a way to just totally amplify what you can offer in that particular channel. So anything else on these real life examples before we get to the concept, as you mentioned a little bit ago, of wearing maybe multiple hats?
Well, I would just say I think it's really an underused strategy. I think people really don't understand sometimes the power of the human brain and how much using the imagination in this type of manner can really just improve your motivation and your confidence.
Yeah, very, very well said. And I would say this is different than visualization, right? So visualization is more pre-performance type of I'm focusing on how I want to perform. The alter ego effect, that is the character. That is the mantra. That is the individual that can take the visualized practice and go out and do what they need to do. So this final concept here on the third episode of season 2 is wearing multiple hats. And if you're listening to this and you're someone that's more maybe analytical and you're like, hey, that sounds kind of like a little bit too woo-woo, this might be a little bit more of a way to perceive it. And that is when we do certain tasks. So let's say, or jobs as well. So let's say I'm going to be a future father, a business owner, a friend, a brother, a son. All of those roles in life come with different ways that we can show up. So maybe you don't think of your alter ego effect as a business thing because you feel good there, but maybe it could be, I want to be the best brother that I can possibly be, or husband or parent. So that's another way to look at this, is that I can wear different hats and show up in different ways because I have the channels to do so. So do you have any comments on kind of the idea of wearing multiple hats instead of the fanciness of alter ego effect?
And I think this is maybe a little bit more approachable for some people that maybe don't quite, maybe wouldn't quite buy into the alter ego, because you do have to believe it for it to work. If you don't believe it will work, it probably won't. But for me, it was when I was a teacher, I was in teacher mode during the school day. After school, I went into coach mode, wore the coach hat, and then I'd go home and try to be the dad and husband, right? And so, and to be able to kind of flip a switch or have a trigger that switches you, because I couldn't go home and yell at my kids and wife the way I yelled at some of the wrestlers, right? It was kind of expected as in an aggressive sport that's part of how you motivate people. But so knowing how to kind of flip that switch and go switch that hat throughout your day, I think is a much easier way for some people to think about it and maybe approach it.
And that's why we wanted to leave that at the end, because some people will listen to this, right? And they will say, I'm all in on this alter ego. I want to create one. I can't wait to get after it. Others are, oh, this makes a lot more sense. I just need to show up and be that version of myself when I am a dad or when I am a mom or a grandson, grandma. There's obviously a variety of roles in everyone, in our lives here. So that's all we had on this really action-packed alter ego effect episode. We really appreciate y'all listening to the Mental Performance Masterclass. And until next time.